I'm going to go ahead and get started. And today we are talking about the why behind the behavior. And this is something that every parent needs to know. A little bit about myself. I am a BCBA. I am in year 8 of my BCBA career. I have 20 years in special education, teaching, out of district placements, residential, in home. I've also been in clinics. So I have done the gamut. I have seen so much. And you know what's so funny? I continue to still see it. I thought I couldn't be surprised at this point, but I get surprised at least twice a week. So, things are ever changing. I have my master's in psychology, ABA. I also have a master's in education leadership. I have my principal cert. I have my supervision cert. I also do virtual supervising for up and coming BCBAs, RBTs, which are registered behavior technicians. I do a lot and I love doing what I do. So thank you again for joining me. Let's see. I'm going to give you the rundown of how we're going to do the slides. So first, we're going to talk a little bit in section 2 about what is behavior and some of those frameworks for behavior. We'll spend a few minutes, give or take 10 minutes, might be less, might be more. I want to try to get everybody out of here on time. So we're also going to talk about a little bit, the ABC model, the three-term contingency, what that is, what it looks like in the classroom, what it looks like in the home, what it looks like in the grocery store. How fun. We're also going to talk about a little bit about behavior across the lifespan of, a toddler, a young child, an older child, and, teens, because, remember, behavior is for everybody. Everybody engages in it. And a lot of times we often think that behavior is, hitting and biting and scratching and, having these tantrums and doing all the things. But, on the bright side, smiling is a behavior as well. And hugging is a behavior, and dancing and laughing. So we're going to talk about behavior across one's lifespan. We are going to talk a little bit about what to do instead when you are seeing some of these behaviors. And that's where we get into a little bit of that function-based responses. And then we'll have, wrap up, next steps, where you go from here, how to work with me, how to look at some of my other resources that, are available to you, because I do have a website that you can log on to. I do have some free resources. I am going to be doing a couple of other in-person type of events, whether it be at schools or there are a lot of like social gatherings that are occurring right now. So I'll be posting all of those. So stay tuned. Let me see. So what we're going to do here, we're going to talk a little bit about who this is for. And before we dive in, I want you to look at the list and see if any of these describe your family. Let's see if I can. Oh, there we go. Needed to move us out of the way. Okay, so think about it. Parents and toddlers, through the teen years. We're also, talking about parents who feel nothing is working. Many of us, we have those little toddlers, and as they approach that 2, for some of us, it was 3. For me, it was 3 with my first. I think it's 2 with my second. You often feel like you're doing and nothing is working. We're also talking to the parent who is navigating IEPs and behavior plans. We are talking to the families of children, who are on the spectrum. They have ASD, they have ADHD, they have IDD, or any other comorbidities or, multi, if you will, disabilities. I always like to call them abilities, but disabilities. We are talking to the parents with children who have Down syndrome or Fragile X or even more. We're also talking to the parents that are bridging home and school gaps, because sometimes what we see at home and what we see at school, they're not aligning. Sometimes they don't listen to us at home and they do all the great things for everybody else, in the school. Or sometimes we don't see those behaviors at all in the home and it is happening everywhere else. So, excuse me. Also, what this session is not about, there are a lot of different parent contents out there with the promises of, a quick fix, we'll help you, this is what you do. And, I sprinkle my little fairy dust and I wave my little magic wand and boom, it's all fixed. No, this is not one of those workshops, okay? It's not a list of tips and tricks. It's not a one size fits all. We are all individuals. We all have our own things going on in our life, the things that we like to work for, the things that we love to do. So it's very individualized and things don't happen overnight. This is definitely not a punishment or discipline strategy session at all. And for one, this is not a place where you are going to be judged as a parent. There is no Bible on how to parent and how to handle a behavior in the moment. And it looks different all the time. So there's no judgment here. So don't ever think that you're doing anything wrong. We're going to talk and hopefully, we'll be seeing each other soon if anything here speaks to you. All right. So what you'll leave with, or what my hopes that you'll leave with, is a lens of a behavior analytic approach that you can use in your home, in the grocery store, at the movies, at the playground. And then you can also transfer it to, your spouse, your co-parent, your parents, the child's grandparents, aunts and uncles. So that way, everybody's on the same page. We are, hoping that some of the age-specific examples that I'm going to run through kind of like resonate with you and you're like, oh, wow, I could do that, or I never thought of that. And remember, everything is individualized. So I'm hoping that it helps you, click something in your brain and you get the confidence to ask better questions and, begin to look at a situation. We are looking at, the why behind the behavior, not just what to do. And you'll sometimes see, the word neurodivergent in here or neurotypical. You'll see students with disabilities or children with disabilities. So I want to make sure that we are being very inclusive when we are talking about everyone, all of us. Okay, so, we'll see examples of children with ADHD or autism or other developmental differences, diagnosed or not. So, all right, let me see if I can move us out the way. All right, so tell me, as I read these, if any of these sound familiar to you. My child does it at home, but not at school, or I don't see any of these behaviors at my house. I, for one, when I am in the schools, a lot of times I hear a lot of parents say, these behaviors don't happen at home. Well, as we all know, the expectation at school and the expectation at home differs quite a bit. What about this one? Nothing is consistent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And of course that all depends on if they're hungry or if nap time was missed or someone has a cold or if they woke up in the middle of the night. So, if the routine was changed. So, some of those ideas going through your head. What about this one? It keeps escalating no matter what I do. So that behavior is kind of getting worse, or it's happening day after day. Or how about this one? I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own house. As we know, we go through this with toddlers, then we have a little bit of a lull sometimes, as the child gets older, and then we hit those preteen years and it's nothing you can do right, nothing you can say, everything is a mess, you've ruined everybody's life, everything is your fault, and you're walking on eggshells. And I will tell you, that is across the board. It doesn't matter whether you're raising neurotypical children or neurodivergent children. I promise you, moms and dads and parents, we are ruining the children's life every single day. So do not feel bad about that. All right. Um, Also here, recently when I was talking with a mom, that the school keeps calling, but there's like no real answers. And so it's kind of like, well, do I go pick them up? Am I like encouraging the behavior from happening? So they try to figure out if something that they're doing or saying is the reason why it's happening, but the school, it doesn't seem to be any help, and it's kind of like, okay, well, it happened at school, like what do you want me to do at home? So those that there, I just want to see if any of those resonate with any of you. And these are the functions that have not been identified yet. And so this is where often myself as
I'm supposed to get my few minutes in 1:30.
oh, let's see if we can meet this person. Okay. Sorry about that. Um, let's see, where they call me in and, they're trying to see like, what's going on? This is happening, that's happening. And that's when I start getting into the function of it all, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The problem with the strategy first thinking. So here's why most advice that you've gotten hasn't worked. It's a trap. There is typically a strategy without science behind it. There are inconsistent outcomes where it works for one set of parents, it doesn't work for another set of parents. It completely fails or bombs in yours. All right. The escalation cycles with no explanation. You have a child who is starting that whining thing, which I know that is our favorite thing, parents, that whine, because I feel like we are all on the same page with that one. And then all of a sudden it gets worse, and then it escalates, and it just keeps going, and you're at your wits' end and you don't know what to do when you're trying to do all the things, but nothing seems to be working. Um, then there are intervention based on like the topography, not the function. So, based on the setting, based on what it looks like, but they have no idea why this behavior is happening. Today, we are going to talk about the fix. We are going to work on understanding behavior through a behavioral science lens. And we're also going to identify the function. We're going to identify the function before choosing a response. We are going to apply age appropriate and profile appropriate strategies, and then also build a consistent, predictable home system. And again, one word that I said in the very beginning is remember, there is no one size fits all. This is all individualized. And this is why one thing might work in your home and something else might work in your sibling's home, your best friend's home. So always keep that in mind. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what behavior is. Behavior is anything an organism does that is observable and measurable. So when your child is engaging in a tantrum or hitting or biting or smiling or jumping or laughing or playing, because remember, all behavior is not considered to be negative. We do have silver linings. There are rainbows and candies sometimes. But behavior is anything a person or organism does that you can measure and see. How many times they do it, when it's occurring, all of those things. Remember, it is not a personality trait, has nothing to do with who they are. It is not a mood or an emotion, and it is often environmentally shaped. A little bit, in the beginning, I talked about that my master's was in psychology, applied behavior analysis. People tend to think that all psychology is the same. It is not. Psychology, ABA, is not of the mind. It is a science. And so it's specifically of the behavior. It's things that we can see, which is observing, things that we can measure. The other side of psychology is when we get into those private thoughts and those feelings, and I can't read private thoughts. So does that mean that your child doesn't, wakes up and is not in, an awkward mood or feeling icky? Oh, it doesn't mean that all day. We look at that and we think that we have to solve that problem, but that might not be the function or the why because of that behavior. All right. Let's look. You have your toddler throwing a cup. You think you respond to it, but it's not defiance. You have a child melts down in a store. Um, it could be a learned behavior pattern, not manipulation. We have one of your children refusing homework. It could be escape maintain, not laziness. All right. You have your teen shutting down. It could be avoidance pattern, not an attitude. So the other side of this, I have to keep moving you guys around because the pictures keep populating everywhere. Um, so the other side of this is for children with ASD or IDD or limited verbal communication. Behavior is their primary language. Deficits in communication increase the frequency and intensity of challenging behaviors. All right. So that is why sometimes, when you're out, or could be students in your classroom, could be, children that you deal with when you go to a family's home or that you see out. Sometimes when there is like a huge communication deficit, that's when you see the behaviors coming out because they are trying to tell us something. They're talking to us. Keep in mind, if you have any questions, throw it in the chat and I'll try to answer them at the end. Let's see. And thank you for popping in. All right. So I want you to remember that behavior is governed by the environment. What happens before shapes everything in the future. Or actually, I should say that again. What happens in the past and then what happens after the behavior occurs shapes everything in the future. All right. And this is where we get into ABC. I don't know if you guys have heard about the ABC, but we have the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. I always like to start with the behavior first because that's the thing that we see. But what happens is with the antecedent, we want to know what happened directly before the behavior occurred. All right. What comes before? What's the antecedent? And then after that, we want to talk about the consequence. What happened right after? It's not the consequence of some type of punishment. It's more or less like, okay, your child throws their sippy cup on the floor. What happened right before? They asked for juice. You gave them water. They threw the sippy cup down. What did you go and do? You either picked the cup up and handed it back to them, or maybe you said, we don't throw cups. All right. So if you are expecting your child to pick up the cup, or if you're expecting your child to use verbal language in order to tell you what they need, if you keep engaging in the raising the voice or doing it for them, they're never going to actually do what you want them to do because you've reinforced that consequence. So the behavior, we look at what happens before, we look at what happens after. Now, on the bottom, you'll see if a behavior keeps happening, then what the child is doing is working. Our job is to figure out how and then teach a better way. One of the most common and costly misreads in parenting is assuming that your child is doing something on purpose, okay? We often assume that they know exactly what they're doing. They're doing this on purpose. They're manipulating me. If they can sometimes, then they can always. So it's like if they can do it sometimes, then they can always do it. All right. But the behavioral reality of it all is behavior is shaped by consequences over time, not intent, especially critical for children with ASD or IDD. History or reinforcement drives behavior, not strategy. So it's that repetitive history. Every behavior your child is doing right now has a reinforcement history. This is not about blame. It's about knowing when and where to intervene. Okay, let's see. So, talking a little bit about history, we are going to look at, and this is where we get a little bit into the psychology of it all. Um, of course, phylogeny, which is not something you're going to have to hold on to, but just a little bit of the history. It's a species level history. It's built in biological tendencies. The ontogeny piece of it, it's your personal learning history and it's your child's reinforcement history, their own, that's unique to them. And then your cultural contingencies are things that are rules and norms and expectations of the family and community, things that you instilled in him or her, things that you are governed by yourself. Um, let's see. The emotion is a flag, all right? The function is the engine. And what we address is the engine of it all. So what's interesting is like me working in a school district, I see a lot of these, things that we are expecting at the school level, no matter what grade, things that the child comes to school with, and that's their personal history. And then since everybody's raised differently with a different set of rules, then, some of us, we are thinking that this child is supposed to know that, like, I don't know, we walk in a line or we sit down or we raise our hand when we want to speak or, we clean up when the teacher asks us to. And that's not necessarily, that's your norm. That's not necessarily, what they have been taught to do at home. So, and we all do it. We all think that everybody's governed under the same way. And then we're like, oh, okay, let me try this again because that didn't work out. And clearly this child does not operate in the same way that I am used to. And I need to understand the function of his or her behaviors. All right. Emotional labeling versus functional variables. Trying to move you guys out of the way again. All right. There we go. So, why labels don't really give us a plan? So, oftentimes, we as parents and aunts and uncles and all the things, family members, we often say, oh, she or he is being dramatic. He's just angry. She's impossible. He's doing it for attention. As a behavior analyst, I often ask, well, what does the behavior get here? Like, if this child is being dramatic, then, but what is the behavior getting him or her? I also ask, what is he or she trying to escape or get access to? What function has this served historically? Constantly, if it's repetitive behavior, then it's happening over and over again. Their needs are being met somehow. And I also ask, well, some, outside of the access and the escape, I sometimes say, is there a sensory need? Because a lot of our kids, they actually have sensory needs. And you'll also be, surprised to learn, or maybe not, that a neurotypical child also has sensory needs. Have you ever been in a meeting as an adult and, you see your coworker, they're doing like this with their hair, or they have it in their mouth, or they're tapping their pen, or their leg is crossed and they're doing that leg shake thing and the whole table is going like this. So we all have various sensory needs. Some are more noticeable than others, all right? So when we talk about a plan, we want to plan to teach appropriate attention-seeking behaviors or appropriate ways to get access to something or appropriate ways to get sensory needs met. What behavior looks like? Wait, I think I wanted to do a check-in. You know what? If you have any questions, just drop it in the chat. I'll respond to them at the end. Again, this will, it is going to be a replay. I am going to, at some point, add this to the YouTube file that I have, so you guys will be able to see it. But I just wanted to let you know, in case you came in later and you didn't see the beginning, you will be able to catch up, and there'll be a link, and you can also see it on my page, which I'll have all at the end for you. So what behavior looks like versus why it happens. All right. So topography, that is what it looks like. Hitting, screaming, crying, shutting down, self-injuring, running away, property destruction, smiling, laughing, jumping, kissing, hugging. All right. The function is the why it happens. It is either attention, escape, access, or sensory. All right. Same topography could equal 4 different functions. You could have the same behavior, and the reason I'm doing it and the reason why you're doing it will mean various things, something completely different. And often for children with ASD and intellectual disabilities, topography first interventions are not just ineffective, they can actually cause harm. Suppressing behavior without addressing function leads to escalating and new, often more dangerous topographies. Function-based assessment is the only ethical approach. So basically, in layman's terms, if we don't address the function, then sometimes the behavior can get worse or it turns into something else and can be dangerous to that child or yourself. All right, so here it is, my quick concept check. And I'm not going to ask anybody to unmute themselves or whatever have you, but can you tell me the function, and I can just tell you from just the topography. So child throws a toy. Teen slams a door. Toddler bites. Do we know the function of these behaviors just by looking at that? Absolutely not. The same behavior can have 4 completely different functions. Same topography, completely different plan. A toddler who bites may be seeking attention, the needs to escape a demand, getting some type of sensory input because they like the crunchiness or the feel of the chewing or the actual initial bite. And the strategy depends 100% on the function of that behavior. Determinism and selection by consequences. So, what this is saying is behavior follows predictable and lawful principles. It's not random. It's not a character flaw. So, behavior that is reinforced is more likely to happen again in the future. Behavior that is not reinforced more than likely will decrease over time. Okay. These principles, let me mute somebody. Okay. These principles, apply all around, all right? Neurotypical, neurodivergent, ASD, IDD, ADHD, all of it, me, you, all right? These behaviors, they happen universally. If a behavior follows a lawful principle, then we can predict it. That means we know, what's going to happen next. We can understand it and systematically change it. That is the science that I work in, all right? And the research constantly and consistently proves the work. The good news is what can be explained can also be changed, and that's why we have to know the why. All right, we're going to talk about the 3-term contingency. That is that ABC model that we were just talking about a few minutes ago, the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. What comes before the behavior occurs. So we're going to, setting the events, like where were we? Were we at grandma's house? Were we at home? Were we in the bedroom trying to get up in the morning, to get to daycare or to get to school? Were we going to church? It could be anything. Were we in the middle of the grocery store? Were we trying to pick out toppings for pizza? Anywhere. All right. And then what the person actually does, remember, that's the observable and measurable thing. We saw them hit. We can measure it, how many times they did it. What the, how hard they, hit somebody or how hard they bit. Or again, the other side. I always say there's the other side or the silver lining to the naughty behavior. It could be a smile. Smiling is a behavior. So the person smiled and oh my goodness, they had this big smile because they got, a beautiful surprise. So keep that in mind. Within that, just to go back a little bit to the antecedent, knowing the triggers. When a behavior occurs often, you begin to know the triggers. You're like, oh, that's going to happen because this just happened. All right. And you begin to know the context of every single thing when you begin to ask questions why. And then we look at what happens. Remember, reinforcement shapes whether it happens again. So sometimes we think that we aren't reinforcing a behavior. Children gauge us. Our significant others gauge us. Many times when I'm working, with children, especially our beautiful, precious littles, I often don't do direct eye contact, because when these little beautiful cherubs look in your eyes, they know exactly whether you mean business or not. All right. And so sometimes we don't think we're reinforcing the behavior, but remember, reinforcement can be negative or positive. So when you're chastising them, that's reinforcement. And it also depends on, like, if they were trying to seek attention and, you're like, oh, well, you need to do this and you need to, well, guess what? You just reinforced that behavior because you responded in a way where they're like, aha, that's the button. I just got mom or dad or whomever upset, and that's always the button. So you don't think you're reinforcing, but you inadvertently are. I'm sorry to tell you. Okay. I see we have somebody else that joins in. Hi, how are you? If you have a question, something resonates with you, drop it in the comment, or you can also talk to me offline. But thank you for popping in and joining us. So let's talk about antecedents. And this is what sets the behavior up. We were just talking about setting events. We were talking about triggers. For toddlers, it could be a skip nap. Gosh, if any of us have toddlers or we've been through the toddler stage, we all know that nap time and that empty belly, more than likely, that is going to be triggered. And honestly, that has to do with meeting, which we're not getting into today, but that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because we need that belly full and we need that rest. And we need to be dry, because if we're not there, oh my goodness, nothing else matters. So, with a skip nap, a toddler has a lower threshold and a tantrum is more likely to ensue. When we're dealing with a young child, it could be, we ask them to stop engaging in a preferred activity, that tablet, the movie, jumping, I don't know, on your couch. I say that because I never thought my children would be jumping on my couch, and here I am. They jump from my couch to the trampoline. Again, don't judge me. In the beginning, we said this is a judgment-free zone. But asking them to stop a preferred activity may equal meltdown. An older child, a difficult demand is presented and, escape behavior begins. Or we have our teen, oh goodness, that public correction, because, sometimes we forget not to correct in public. Nobody likes to be embarrassed, or we don't think it's a big deal. And now they've shut down and we are in the world of defiance. Okay. So, also with some of our other learners, we have sensory overload. We've got hunger, we've got illness, we've got a disruption in the routine. And this can definitely lower the behavioral threshold where nobody is doing anything we ask. The same demand may produce completely different behaviors based on the antecedent or what's happening before the behavior actually occurs. So in my world, the behavior analyst world, we have something called motivating operations. And this is a game changer for everyone, because this is why context changes everything. When we are establishing, an operation, what we're actually doing is we are making that reinforcer more valuable. So for example, some of us have littles that don't like to eat, right? And I'll tell you this, if there's no established operation or motivating operation, which is that hunger, they're probably not going to eat. You ever notice when you pull out the gummies or the little, the little candies that they like to chew? I can't think of it right now, but fruit snacks. Okay. Oh, they love those. Nobody ate any food. Okay. But they like that. And they like whatever they're not supposed to have to eat or drink. All right. Now we've created a reinforcer, an established operation. And so it increases the behavior that gets it, you know? So there we go. A child hasn't eaten, food becomes highly motivating, demand behavior skyrockets. All right. And that's only if they're hungry. But if you have that tablet, because most of our children like them, I bow down to all the parents that have opted against screen time. Um, I don't know how you do it. I bow down to you. You are the MVP because I do use tablets over here. But I'll tell you one thing. Um, we earn tablet time over here. And so that's another thing. If I know somebody likes tablet time and you're only allowed an hour or two of it a day, well, guess what? Now you have to get all your things done so you can earn your time or earn extra. Now I've established a motivating operation. Okay. So when we abolish that operation, it makes the reinforcer less valuable. So it decreases the behavior. A child just had 2 hours of play. Attention has lower value. Attention seeking decreases. All right. So remember that the same demand can produce completely different behaviors depending on the child's current state. And that's why we have to know the why for everything, because we think that, if we just come up with a punishment or a reinforcer or whatever, have a consequence, as I like to call it in my house, we think that that's going to actually work. But if we don't know the why, we're just actually throwing stones at it and trying to hope to put the fire out without water or fire extinguisher or anything. Okay. Consequences. This is what keeps the behavior alive. All right. We have the positive reinforcement, which is something that is added after the behavior. We add it into the environment and then we get the behavior to increase. So our examples: attention, access, praise, the preferred item, some sensory input, could be like some squeezes or massages or some tickles, things like that. Then we have negative reinforcement. That's something that's removed from the environment after the behavior occurs. And typically we have the behavior increasing. So that could be, examples would be demand removed, discomfort stopped, person leaves, the task ends. But the most common misconception is, I don't give them anything when they act out. Attention is reinforcement. So removing a demand is reinforcement. All right. If you are trying to figure out what's wrong, talk to me, it's all reinforcement. So that's why it's important to, I always tell my parents I work with, before we begin engaging in the behavior and trying to figure it out, take a breath. Because what you say or do next is going to matter in the moment, because that's going to either increase that behavior or decrease it. So we've been talking a little bit about access and attention and sensory and all those things. What in the world are those things? Those are the 4 functions of behavior, in which we call SEAT, SEAT. And every behavior serves a purpose or a function. And it could be one or more of these behaviors at a time, or it could start as one function, and based on how we respond, it begins to turn into multiple functions or a different function. Okay. So we have the social attention piece. That is, behavior gets someone to look, to talk, to respond, to engage with them, and even negative attention counts. All right. Then we have E, escape or avoidance. Now that can behavior. So I want to say this in 2 ways. Behavior removes a demand, person, task, sensory input, or uncomfortable situation. But with escape and avoidance, escape is when you are already doing something. So let's just say your child's at the table doing homework with you, right? And you keep telling them to pick up their pencil, and they're doing all of these things, and I need water, I've got to go to the bathroom, just can I finish my snack first, all that thing, right? Those are ways they're trying to escape. Avoidance is when you've got everything set up for the homework. They never even come to the table. They're upstairs. They're already in the bathroom. They've never met you at that table. So that's the difference in those two. A, we have access to tangibles. Behavior gets something wanted, a toy, food, screen time, a preferred activity. So they're trying to get access to that thing that is highly, highly, highly preferred. And then we have an automatic function, also known as sensory, and that behavior produces internal sensory reinforcement. No social contact is needed. This child can engage in this behavior whether you're in the room or not. And we see that most common in our babies that have ASD or IDD or other, multiple disabilities. But again, as I said, we all have sensory needs. That person that twirls their hair or taps their pen or, needs to go like this or shake their fingers. So we all have it. All right, those needs. So, in my world, especially like, when I'm in the schools and I'm in the autism classroom, definitely I know when we're out, we see a lot of sensory needs where our kiddos, are flapping their arms or moving back and forth. They're jumping, they're excited about something, and this is their way of communication. They enjoy it. We do not have to be around for an automatic function to be present. All right. And there are different ways that we handle that, because the word that I want you to keep in your mind is replacement. We want to replace behavior. So keep that in your mind. All right. So let's talk about seat when it's in action. And I have a couple of like age-based examples here. So again, let's go to the toddler. We have the toddler, cries when put down, attention, access, we teach a replacement signal. There we go. Young child, tantrum at transition, possibly escape or access. We have the older child, refuses homework or, could be escape. We've got the teen, they argue, they leave the room, escape or attention. And then, we could have a student with, on the spectrum or has intellectual disability or more of a communication disability. Could be headbanging, could be rocking, could be aggression during a demand. We could see all types of behaviors. Could be automatic function, could be escape. All right. And then trying to move you guys out the way. And then on the other side, we could have key implications on the things that we should be doing. Could be teaching a replacement signal, could be doing a countdown first, could be modifying the demand or teaching someone how to ask for a break. We could implement a sensory diet. We could teach functional communication or teach, a communication alternative. And sometimes we don't have a lot of words, but we either use a device and we have that word, then we teach our child how to prompt that cue on the device, or we teach one word because they do have a little bit of vocal verbal language. And, we teach them how to say that word, and we're not expecting a whole sentence. But you know what? If you want me to do something, you either have to say this or give me the sign or show me on your device. Same topography, different function, completely different interventions. So over here, we're talking about when consequences reinforce the wrong thing. All right. We are always reinforcing something. Is it on purpose? No. Child hits, parent yells, child stops temporarily. Tomorrow, same behavior occurs. All right. We are always reinforcing it. We're not doing it on purpose. And the solution is not to feel guilty. We are working on building systems that reinforce the right behavior on purpose. And remember, the right behavior is individual to your child. There's no magic wand and there's no fairy dust that we sprinkle on it. Consistency and reinforcement. So I talk a lot about the slot machine effect and why it matters. Okay, so with the slot machine effect, there is a variable ratio which equals the strongest schedule in the behavior science. So variable ratio means when you reinforce and they don't know when and why they're going to get reinforcement. If you do it all the time, it's kind of expected, and then, we kind of get bored with it or, satiated with the things that we're being given or earning. So we like to stick with a variable ratio because now we know, oh my goodness, I'm going to give it. I don't know when I'm going to get it. So let me do this. Let me do what I'm supposed to do. Oh yeah, you want me to do? Okay, I clapped my hands. Let me ask nicely. Can I please have this? Or now it's variable because then they're wanting to earn it and they don't know when they're going to get it. So it also strengthens the behavior. It's not the end of it. Then it says, of course, what consistency does is makes behavioral expectations predictable. It speeds up acquisition and the replacement behaviors, and it must be consistent across all caregivers. So this is where it gets hard because at home we might be doing one thing, dad might be doing another, grandma's doing another, aunt's doing another, babysitter's doing something else. And so it's very important for all of us to be on board at the same time. All right. And it's a big thing. And that means some conversations, need to be had. Um, Keep in mind, if you say no 5 times and give in on the sixth, you've just taught your child that the six is the magic number. And so this is why we also do like this variable ratio, because like we think we're doing it, like we're killing it, we're mastering it. No, I said no, blah, 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 blah. I'm sticking to the line. And then they wear you down. And on that 7th time, you give in. Well, guess what? Now you've just increased it to 7. And if you keep doing it the same way, you'll increase it to 10. All right. Oh, goodness. No, I didn't want to do that. Okay. Why development age matters. So principles are constant, and we all develop at different points in our life. And so we think about the cognition, we think about self-regulation, we think about access to language, we think about social awareness. So when we say things like, oh, he knows better than that, or don't you know what you're doing, or they're just manipulating the situation, or they're just spoiled, we really have to be looking at the age and the cognition or cognitive ability of this particular child. All right. We all develop differently. And we all are capable of doing different things. Now, even though behavior is taught and learned, remember development, it's developmental age, and it could be age appropriate, but some of us, like, they'll say, oh, so and so should be eating solids, by 6 months. Sometimes it takes 8, 9, 10 months. Oh, well, so and so started walking at 10 months. Oh, yeah, well, so and so didn't start walking until 14 months. So we have to think about that. All right. Often children with disabilities, like such as a 10-year-old with moderate IDD, may function behaviorally at a 3 to 4-year-old developmental level. Behavioral concerns in these children kind of like, I guess, exacerbate functional difficulties and can lead to more restrictive education environments or greater family burden. What I mean by that is that sometimes the child is looked at as a 10-year-old and they're actually functioning as a 3 or 4-year-old. So we need to meet the child where they are on that level and teach those skills to get them to where they are currently. And it's going to take a while. But remember, the disability is playing the role in how quick we're moving and things like that. So it is our job to make sure that we are aware of the cognitive capacity, the self-regulation skills, the language access, and also social, all of the social awareness for this particular child. Guys, I hate that I have to keep moving this camera around, but I know what I'm going to do the next time. When your child has a diagnosis, everything we've covered applies, all right? Now, what changes and what doesn't? What does not change? The 4 functions of behavior will always be SEAT, S-E-A-T. The ABC behavior model, that will stay the same. The role of reinforcement and antecedents, that will stay the same. And the need for a replacement behavior, that will stay the same. But what will change eventually is, and over time, will be the intensity and frequency of the behavior, communication access available to the child, caregiver stress level, and the need for individualized support or function-based support. All right. And this is where, I come in, a lot of my colleagues come in as behavior analysts, early intervention comes in. We've got SLPs, OTs, PT, working with our kids. So the behavior is communication links in individuals with disabilities. So basically, behavior is the message when words aren't available. So remember, behavior is communication. So the more limited the communication repertoire, the more powerful and intense you will see some behaviors, all right? So I need, the behavior could be saying, help. They need a break. They need sensory. They need regulation. I want, the behavior is saying they need access, attention. Maybe they want a preferred activity. We're saying stop. The behavior is saying end this demand, end the sensory input. I can't stand it. Leave me alone. And also, when they say they want more, it could be, they want to continue something. They don't want to transition. They want to stay exactly where they are. So the reason why I chose, I want, stop, and more is because we have something called FCT, which is functional communication um, teaching. So we're training. And so what we do is we teach replacement words because sometimes, a child may only have a few words in their repertoire. And so we teach the very basic. And then that way, and they're engaging in that behavior without engaging in problem behavior. The well-meaning caregiver trap, which we all fall into. So removing the demand. A child hits during a task, parent immediately ends the task. Okay, we're done. They need a break. Child has learned that hitting gets them to escape. The result is now that the hitting actually reinforces their escape, and so now the behavior increases. Every time they don't want to do something, they're going to hit. All right. Consoling during SIB, which is self-injurious behavior. Child's banging their head. Parent rushes over. Hugs or comforts. Child learned that SIB equals attention. Now we've attended to, the SIB, and now we're going to get more of that behavior. I'm not saying that we shouldn't attend to the behavior. I'm saying that for your specific child, if they engage in that, then we need to talk more because we're going to learn function and then we're going to learn the strategies to implement. All right. I want you to know you are not alone. 88% of children with autism engage in mild to severe aggression, most directed to their caregivers. 50% of individuals with IDD experience some form of challenging behavior, and rates are higher when ASD is also present. And 14% of American children with developmental disabilities, behavioral challenges, are the norm, not the exception. I want you to know that I really do appreciate you guys logging in today. And again, I am going to download this to my YouTube channel. So at the end where you see my website, you'll be able to see how to, contact me. And you can actually go on my page, go on my little store. You'll see the YouTube and all of that. I've got some free resources and some other things. But if today's content describes your family, you are exactly where you need to be. There's a complete whole science behind this. All right. Why standard parenting advice fails neurodivergent families? Well, because they're given things like, oh, just ignore it. Oh, he needs more discipline. Oh, take away his privileges. Parents are tired and I understand and I feel for you. Delayed reinforcement is not developmentally accessible for many children with ASD or IDD. We are constantly trying to give of ourselves and do all the things because we want to make sure that we are raising a child that can function in society. All right. So if that means I'm going to give them this banana or I'm going to give them this juice so that they can regulate themselves, if that's what I know how to do, that's what I'm going to do it. All right. The function of behavior has never been assessed. And remember that. We always have to talk about that. Of course, I'm in the homes, I'm in the schools, so I'm doing functional behavior assessments, but you parents at home, sometimes what's working in the schools may not work at home, and you need some other assessments going on in your home so you can have an understanding of how to respond in the moment. The replacement behavior has not been explicitly taught. You don't know what to teach. The child may have the cognitive capacity to understand the contingency, but these strategies were designed for neurotypical children and outcomes, all right? Not necessarily your child. And so parenting interventions for children with IDD significantly enhance behavioral outcomes, but only when they are appropriately tailored to your child. Remember that, individual. Early intervention is everything. The window matters, all right? Don't wait and see. I know we depend on our doctors, on trying to figure out, okay, well, are they developing, normally is this within the age range? All right, don't wait. If your gut tells you, talk to more people. All right. We are on Facebook. We are on IG. We've got TikTok. We have all of these. We have AI. All right. Now, AI may be able to answer you, but it cannot help you learn the strategy that you need to work with your child. All right. So I think AI is a beautiful thing. But remember, you do need someone that can actually teach you how to implement in your home. And also, be your cheerleader, be your coach, be your support person. All right. And AI, even though it can give us a lot of information, they can't be your cheerleader or coach for you. All right. So we have early intervention, which is highly cost effective for IDD, but we all know that goes up to the age of 3. Um, we have the early intensive behavioral intervention. So we look at the IQ and how it, how research looks at the IQ and how it changes over a 12-month period. But typically the window. So behavioral systems are most shapeable early. The youngest child that I worked with was 16 months, and this child was not yet diagnosed. However, mom did see a need, and so I worked with the family. I actually worked with the child at that time, and until they were able to get a diagnosis, which took a little bit. And it was really good, because when we started at 16 months old, I believe now she is 5 years old, and she is talking, and she is participating in school, and she is in a gen ed class, well, an ICR class here in my state. And but she has the help of the special ed teacher, she has the help of the gen ed teacher, she has her therapies, but that's because we hit it early, because mom knew. So remember, your window is small. We talked a little bit about, okay, yes, the ages of 1 to 3. We've got the pre-verbal. Um, every challenging behavior is a message. We've got, emotional regulation. We need co-regulation. Toddlers literally cannot self-regulate. They cannot self-regulate. It is okay to hug and kiss your child. It is okay. It is okay to get down on your knees and give them a hug. You might not be saying anything, any words, but it is okay. All right. Object permanence is still developing. So if it's out of sight, genuinely, it means it's gone. Like, oh my God, it's not coming back. All right. And then PCITT, behavioral support and attachment are inseparable at this stage. You need to be present, and finding out. You need to jot down your notes and doing your research and calling people like me. I also have other colleagues that can talk to you so that you can get your questions answered and make the right decision for you and your family, because there is help out here for all of us, and there is support, and we all need it. It doesn't matter what stage we are. It doesn't matter the ability or disability of our children. We need to be helping each other. We are out here. I have some information on what works at this age. So we have the visual routines, predictable responses, that functional communication piece. We teach simple signals, like, even when they're little, when they're before the age of 1, we're doing things like more. We're doing things like, eat. We're doing things like bathroom. So there are signs that are out there that you can use in your home, that your kids, whether they're speaking yet or not, they're out here and you can learn them and teach them. We've got the ages 4 to 7. So this is where they're beginning to understand rules. Attention and escape are dominant functions at this age. The high risk moments are transitions, demand presentation, and preferred item removal. All right. And they fully need warmth and security first, then behavior management. For our children that in that 8 to 12 age range, this is when those peer relationships become important. Academic demands and social comparison begin to dominate. All right. Escape from demands and access to peer attention. That's the most common function cluster. This is where parents start labeling behavior as attitude or laziness. And this is where we also see skill gaps in reading, writing, and executive function become visibly, behavior driving. This is where we see it. So keep that in mind. For our older teens, this is where they want their autonomy. It becomes dominant, and it's a motivating operation. Escape is perceived as control. I'm dealing with that. I have a high school that I work with, so there's a lot of control things going on there. That's also where the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until the age of 25. Power struggles escalate, escape maintain behaviors. When you stop pulling, they stop pushing. So it's kind of like that tug of war. And effective teen programs involve the teen as a participant and not the parents. All right. So always remember that. And we have to give them the room to speak, to have an opinion. We always want to make sure that we're doing it in a respectful way, but they should have a voice because we'll never know exactly what's on their mind unless they're participating in these things. I have an age comparison chart. Trying to move you guys out the way because we are okay. Give me a few more minutes, guys, and then we'll be done. So we have the primary function, the key caregiver skills, the biggest trap, and what works. So here, with our toddler, young child, older child, and teen, we have just the different, we have communication, we have co-regulation, we have giving in, we have the functional communication. If you notice, everything is lined up to what they're actually capable of doing. And when I have toddler in mind, I start with the age of 2, okay, because this is when they get very tricky and uncooperative, because I have a 2-year-old myself. Then we have the young child, and it gives you, this chart. And if anybody reaches out to me, I can actually get this chart to you so you can have it for your refrigerator. You can also have it for your email, and just that way you know when the power struggles begin and what you're dealing with at each level. Your blueprint, though, will always stay the same. The function, let's see. So 5 steps of behavioral blueprint. So one thing you will always do, number 1, you're going to observe. Write down your topography, what it looks like and where it's happening, okay? What it looks like exactly, what you can see, not what you think happened, all right? Then you're going to hypothesize. That's where you apply seat. What function is most likely this serving? Is it sensory? Is it escape? Is it avoidance? Is it sensory? Is it access to tangible? All right. Then you're going to modify, change the antecedent, change what you did before the behavior occurred to prevent triggering before it misfires. You're going to teach. So you will identify and reinforce the replacement behavior serving the same function. All right. So I know that is difficult and it kind of sounds crazy. And that's why you need people like me to help you understand. All right. Replacement behavior. I had you till there, Shivonne, but we can talk about some replacement behaviors that match the function, because if you're doing a replacement behavior that doesn't match the function, then this behavior is never going to extinguish, or you might want it to increase. Keep that in mind. All right. And then you're going to evaluate. Watch what happens. So adjust based on what the data shows. When you change, they change. One thing I always like to tell everybody is we don't change other people's behavior. We change our behavior. We change how we respond to them in the moment, which ultimately gets them to change how they engage in that particular behavior. Okay? All right, let's see. Differential reinforcement. This is critical. You cannot just stop the behavior. You must replace it with something. Remember a little while ago we talked about replacement? You have to replace it with something. We can't expect the behavior to just disappear. That is not going to happen. And even when it does, I promise you it typically resurfaces later in the year, next year, and it possibly could be worse. All right. We have something called a differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, and that's where we are rewarding and reinforcing all the other or alternative behaviors that the child engages in outside of that thing we don't want them to do. And then we also have differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, which we reinforce a behavior that is incompatible with the problem behavior. So like hands on knees is physically impossible to do if you're hitting. Right? So, if you see somebody hitting hands on knees and every time they have their hands on knees, oh my God, I love that you have your hands on knees. Great job. So things like that. And you'll be surprised, especially with the young ones. Oh, they love it. I mean, they love it through elementary school too. We have to get a little bit more creative as they get older, but that's to be expected. Talking about, that we also, we talked about that functional communication piece. Same thing. We identify. So we have to assess the function of the behavior, always, using seat and observation. Then we select, we're going to choose the communication response appropriate for that child's level. We'll reinforce, delivering that function matched reinforcement every single time. And then we will withhold. So you're not going to reinforce that challenging behavior. It now has something better that it competes with. Often you will see children with disabilities, communication modality must match the child's access level. So we have the AAC devices, we have PECs, we use sign language, we use gestures. I have my little cards, that we use that I wear on my wrist. So remember, we always have to match their ability. And extinction, what is it and what it's not? So extinction is withholding a specific reinforcer, maintaining the behavior. So with attention, we withhold the attention. If we know a child is hitting and they want that attention, unfortunately, we cannot attend to that hitting, no matter how much we want to. We cannot verbally do it. We cannot. So it is very hard. So we literally remove ourselves. We remove the person they're hitting, but we do not engage with them, because the moment we do, aha, now I've got you. You're upset. And I've hit that little button. All right. Same thing with escape and access. What extinction is not? It's not the same as ignoring. All right. Don't get it wrong. I always say we ignore the behavior, not the child. So the child is, you're engaging with the child. You're just not engaging or saying anything about that particular behavior. It's not appropriate for automatically reinforced behavior. So remember, there are certain things, like when you're ignoring a behavior, you're not ignoring someone engaging in SIB. You never use alone. So you always pair with a replacement behavior. And if you work with me, I can always teach you what a replacement behavior looks like. You can also, I'm sure, look it up, but you still have to learn how to use it in that moment. That's when we get into extinction bursts, but you know what? I'm going to save that for another time, because that gets a little bit cumbersome and probably more of a question answer type series. Reinforcement is not bribery. My parents love to say that reinforcement is bribery. We are not bribing children. We are not bribing children. We are not bribing children. All right. We are offering. Okay. So offering a reward to stop a behavior already in progress, that is reactive. That's when you teach the behavior that it needs to escalate to get it. Reinforcement is planned consequence for desired behavior after it occurs. Typically, bribery is either reactionary or you give it to them before. But when you reinforce, it's proactive and it happens after. So it's kind of like if then. If you do this, then you earn this. It's nothing I give you. It's something that you earn. All right? Keep that in mind. And it looks different for each stage of childhood. It looks different for us. Antecedent strategies, the change in the environment first. So when we talk about behavioral interventions, in preventing triggers and antecedent strategies, these are all the things that we do all day long to keep the behavior from happening, or to keep the behavior at low rates so that we don't have to actually engage when there is a problem behavior. So, we do warnings, we do countdowns, we modify the demand, we modify a visual schedule, we look at the predictability, we modify the environment, all the things that we do to keep the behavior from happening. And basically, once you have learned the function of this behavior, you will know, okay, we can't do this because, little Johnny has not had a nap today, and we are not able to do that. We're going to do that tomorrow. Maybe little Johnny's belly is not full right now. So that's what I mean by like modifying things. Antecedent strategies actually work because now you're prepared. You're always planning for what to do next. And so the goal is to reduce these behaviors because you're doing all these things all day long, okay? And I encourage my teachers to do the same thing so that those behaviors don't pop up. The parent is the change agent. The research is clear. Parent involvement is not supplemental. It is the intervention. Many times when I'm in the homes, doing supervision as a BCBA and I'm working with the RBT or the BT, it's the BT and the student working together. When I come in the home, I'm making sure that the parent is participating because they need to know what to do when we leave. If we're always doing everything when we leave, do you know that everything is going to go crazy and things are going to backfire? All right. Parents need to know what's going on so that they can predict what's going to happen in the environment and then they can implement. It is the strongest gift that they have. You guys are the change agent. It's a direct investment in what you want, your family to look like and how you can help it be such. For the behavior blueprint framework, there is a 5-step takeaway. All right. We have one, we want to understand, we want to adjust, we want to teach, we want to reinforce, and we want to evaluate. That is my 5-step blueprint. We have talked about it through this entire presentation. Tomorrow morning or tonight or whatever you're thinking, maybe you want to pick one behavior, just one, not all of them, just one. The one that happens most frequently, the most that's disruptive to your daily life. You're going to observe that one behavior for 3 days. Document what happens before and what the behavior looks like and document what happens after. So basically you set up a 3-column piece of paper, you fold your paper into 3, and you write A, B, C. The behavior goes in the middle. Your antecedent goes on one side. Your consequence goes on the other. All right. After you observe for 3 days, and remember, you're not writing a novel. It's what you can see and what actually happened. And it's not your feelings or your thoughts, what you observed. You're going to apply C. So based on your ABC data, you're going to see which function this most likely serves. Was it attention? Was it access to tangible? Was it escape or avoidance? Or was it sensory? Remember, seat. And then bring it to your data professional and start applying the framework yourself. Now, your data professional could be somebody you work with, another behaviorist you know. I would love it to be me. It could be a colleague of yours, a teacher friend. All those people, they can help you look at this data, all right? And then, talk more about that. And then you can start applying your framework yourself. So, ready to take the next step? Here's how you can work with my company, which is Behavior Blueprint Consulting. You can do a strategy call, all right? And you would start, at step 1, you would go to get on my calendar. We could do a 15-minute. You could email me directly. I also, on the last page, I will have a little QR code for you, so you can start there. So you always have me logged in your phone. If you're school support, you need IEP navigation, behavior plan review, bridging the gap between home and school. I'm available for that. If you need parent consultation or ongoing guidance for parents who want to understand your behavior patterns, prepare for school conversations, and build a home plan, or you want to do a deeper dive into this, webinar series, there will be more. We can talk about functional communication. We could talk about teen behavior, your IEP prep. So there's all types of things that we can do to specifically work for you. I am available to you. I am not an advocate, but I am a BCBA. I am a former special education teacher. In case you were not here in the beginning, I am a former gen ed teacher. I have worked in out-of-district placements. I have worked in, in homes, clinical, schools, residentials, you name it, I am there. And I also have my master's in applied behavior analysis and also education leadership. So which means I also have a principal cert and a supervisor cert. I can't speak today, probably because I've been talking too long. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for joining me today and being patient. And we ran a little bit over, but your presence is so appreciated. I am so thankful to you guys. Again, if you go on my site, you'll be able to see I am going to load on YouTube. Remember, behavior isn't the problem. Behavior is the communication. Your job and mine is to learn what it's saying. And if you want to take a screenshot of the QR code, it will take you directly to my website. Share it. If anything you've heard resonated with you, contact me. I would love to hear from you. Bye for now.